I ordered a pizza for 5:30, I said. Klein nodded in approval. You're always prepared, I joked. But then he got serious and said, hey, after this I'm heading back to the town of beginnings. I'm meeting up with some friends from another game. He looked at me with a curious expression. Want me to introduce you? We can add each other as friends. So it's easy to chat later. I hesitated, unsure what to say. Getting along with Klein was no problem. But his friends were a different story. What if we didn't click? That could make things weird between Klein and me. I stuttered, before I could give a clear answer. Klein just smiled and said, no big deal if you're not interested. Here's the rewritten text. Don't worry, you'll meet them another time, I said. Klein shook his head again, and I added, thanks for asking though. But then Klein surprised me. No way, I should be thanking you. He exclaimed. You really helped me out, and I owe you one. I'll make it up to you someday. Mentally, that is. He grinned and checked the time on his screen. Alright. I've got to log off for now. Thanks again, Kirito. We should hang out soon. As we shook hands, I realized that Klein must be an amazing leader in that other game he played. For sure, I said. If you have any questions or need help, just ask me anytime. Got it. We dropped our handshake, and that's when everything changed. Sword Art Online, the amazing game world of Aincrad, was no longer just a fun escape. It had become something more. Klein took a step back and held up 2 fingers on his right hand, then swiped them down. This was the signal to bring up the game's main menu. Suddenly a purple rectangle appeared in front of us, making a soft jingling sound like bells. I walked back a few steps and sat down on a nearby rock. Then I opened my own menu window and started sorting through the cool items I'd picked up from battling those tough boars. Just as I was getting organized, Klein muttered, huh. He looked totally confused. Wait a minute, I exclaimed. There's no way to log out. My friend stopped what he was doing and looked up at me. What do you mean, there's no button? I asked, getting frustrated. Check again. My friend Klein leaned in close to the screen. He's really into this game, and his crazy bandana makes him look like a total warrior. On the screen we had a long window with tabs on the left, and a picture of a person on the right. That's where you can see all your cool stuff, weapons, armor, and other loot. But when I looked back at my own list of awesome items I'd collected during our epic battles, Klein shouted again, I'm telling you, it's gone. The logout button is missing. I couldn't believe it. We should have been able to just click the button at the bottom of the menu and leave the game. But now, it was nowhere to be found. Check it out for yourself, Kirito, I said. But I already knew what I was going to find. I let out a frustrated sigh and tapped the button in the top left corner of the screen. This took me back to the main menu. My item storage list closed, and the window returned to normal. The silhouette of my character appeared again, with some empty equipment slots. The menu tabs showed up on the left side of the screen. I slid my finger down to the bottom button, but then I froze. Something was off. The logout button was gone. I could have sworn it was there earlier. When I first logged in at 1 o'clock. Klein had noticed it too, and now it had vanished into thin air. I stared at the empty space for a few seconds, wondering if I was going crazy. Then I looked up and scanned the menu tabs carefully, thinking maybe the logout button had just moved to a different spot. But nope, it was really gone. Klein raised an eyebrow at me, like he was saying I told you so. I nodded in agreement. Yeah, it's definitely gone. Fine. It's gone, I said, not happy about it. My friend made a face and rubbed his chin. Well, it's launch day, things don't always go smoothly. I'm sure the tech people are getting slammed with calls right now, he said calmly. I shot back at him. That's all you've got to say? What about our pizza plans for 5:30? His eyes went wide, and he sat up straight. Oh no, I totally forgot. I couldn't help but smile at his panicked face. Meanwhile, I was having some issues of my own. My inventory screen was glowing red, which meant I was carrying too much stuff. I got rid of some junk to lighten my load, and the screen stopped glowing. I stood up and walked over to Klein, who was freaking out about his lost pizzas and ginger ale. Dude, you should try sending a help ticket to the Game Masters, I said. They might be able to kick you out of the system. But Klein just shook his head. I already tried that, and nobody got back to me. It's already 5:25. Kirito, is there another way to log out of this game? He looked at me with pleading eyes. His hands held out like he was begging. My smile started to fade, and I felt a weird sense of worry creeping in. Let me think, I said. Normally logging out of the game was super easy. All you had to do was open the menu, click the log out button, and then confirm that you really wanted to leave when the game asked if you were sure. But for some reason Klein couldn't do it, and now he was getting really desperate. I tried to explain things to Klein, but he just wouldn't listen. There's no other way out of this game except through the menu. I told him. He looked at me like I was crazy. No way. There has to be another way, he said, his voice getting louder and louder. Klein started yelling at the top of his lungs, log out, exit, get us out of here. But nothing happened. The game, yo, didn't care what we said, it just kept going like normal. Klein got more and more frustrated. He jumped up and down, waving his arms. I had to calm him down. Klein, stop, it's not going to work, I said quietly. I checked the manual again, just in case, but it didn't say anything about how to get out of the game in an emergency. Klein was shocked. This is insane, he exclaimed. Games can have glitches, but not ones that trap you inside. What about our real lives? Our bodies? We should be able to go home whenever we want. He turned to me, his face filled with worry and fear. I couldn't believe what was happening. It sounded crazy, but it was our reality now. My friend Klein was freaking out. This is insane, he exclaimed. We're stuck inside this video game. You've got to be kidding me. He started laughing nervously. Klein tried to think of a way out. I'll just shut off the machine or take off this Nerve Gear headset, he said. He rubbed his hands over his head, like he was trying to remove an invisible helmet. But I knew it wouldn't work. I felt a chill run down my spine as I explained why. We can't do that, I said. The Nerve Gear controls our bodies. It intercepts the signals from our brains to our limbs. I tapped the back of my neck to show him what I meant. It translates those signals into actions in the game. We're trapped. Whoa, that's why we can move around like this in the game, Klein exclaimed. Before falling quiet and slowly dropping his arms, we froze, our minds racing with thoughts. You see, for the Nerve Gear to work its magic and transport us into the game world, it has to read the signals from our brain to our spine, cancel them out, and turn them into digital movements. It's like a super cool translator. This means that even if I wildly wave my arms in the game, my real body stays perfectly still on my bed. It's a safety feature that prevents me from accidentally bumping into things, like my desk. But now it's also what's stopping us from getting out of the game. Klein looked just as confused as I felt. So we're stuck until someone fixes the bug or takes off our headgear? He asked. I nodded in agreement, feeling a surge of worry. The problem was, I live alone. Here's the rewritten text. I hesitated for a moment before answering. I live with my mom and little sister. I said, if I don't come down for dinner, they'll probably drag me out of here. Klein's eyes lit up with curiosity. How old is your sister? He asked, leaning in close. I playfully pushed him away. Hey, that's enough about my family. You're just trying to distract yourself from what's going on. I smiled. My sister is into sports and hates video games. She's not really into the same things we are. I waved my hand, trying to change the subject. Don't you think this is all pretty weird? Klein nodded. Yeah, the game is definitely glitchy. But I shook my head. This is more than just a normal bug. Here's the rewritten text. Being stuck in the game is a big problem. It could ruin everything. Think about it, every minute you're stuck here, something real is slipping away. Like your pizza getting colder and colder. That's money down the drain. Klein mumbled something weird. Cold pizza is worse than natch that doesn't get sticky. I ignored him and kept going. When things go wrong like this, the game makers usually shut down the servers and kick everyone out. But it's been at least 15 minutes since we found this glitch, and nothing has happened. We're still online, and there hasn't even been a message from the game to let us know what's going on. I don't get it, I said. Klein nodded. You're right. He rubbed his chin and looked serious for a change. His narrow eyes sparkled under the bandana that covered the top of his nose. As Klein kept talking, I couldn't help but think how weird this was. I was discussing real-life stuff with someone I met by accident in a game. If I just deleted my account, I'd probably never see him again. Think about it, Klein said. The people who made Sword Art Online, called Argus, are really good at listening to their players. That's why everyone was so excited for their first game. It shows how much the gaming community trusts them. Can you believe they messed up so badly on their first day? It's like they're trying to ruin their own reputation.
I thought to myself.
Klein seemed to agree with me. We both let out a frustrated sigh at the same time, looking at each other in our virtual game world. The problem was big. Sword Art Online was the very first virtual reality game of its kind. If this mistake caused a huge controversy, it could affect all games like it. The government might even step in and make rules that would hurt the whole gaming industry. As we stood there, I took a deep breath of the cool winter air. It felt just like the real thing. In Aincrad, the game world, the seasons matched up with the real world outside. So since it was early winter outside, it was also winter in the game. I looked up at the sky and saw something really cool. More than 100 yards above us, the bottom of the second floor glowed a faint purple color. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. As I walked across the flat, rocky ground, my eyes fixed on something amazing in the distance, a huge tower that marked the entrance to a maze. This maze would lead us to the next part of the castle. Beyond the tower, I could see a big opening on the other side of the floor. It was already past 5:30, and the sky was turning a deep red as the sun began to set. The sunlight made the wavy fields shine like gold, and it took my breath away. But then everything changed in an instant. Klein and I jumped up, startled by a loud ringing noise that sounded like a super loud alarm. "What's going on?" we shouted at the same time, looking at each other with wide eyes. And then we saw it. We were both surrounded by pillars of bright blue light. It was crazy. Here's what happened. I was standing in a beautiful field with my friends. And then poof, everything around us started to fade away like a movie screen turning off. This weird effect had happened to me before, when I was testing out the game, but only when I used a special item that let me travel super fast to another place. The problem was I didn't have that item with me this time, and I definitely hadn't told the game to send me somewhere else. As I tried to figure out what was going on, the world around me started to glow with a bright blue light. It was so strong that it blocked my vision, and all I could do was wait for it to stop. When the light finally faded away, I looked around and realized we weren't in the field anymore. But where were we? The scenery had totally changed. As I stepped into the town, I was blown away by how cool it looked. The streets were lined with big flat stones and trees that seemed to stretch up to the sky. It felt like I had traveled back in time to a medieval city, but one that was super clean and fancy. In the distance, I saw an enormous palace that looked like something out of a fantasy movie. It was dark and shiny, and I knew right away that it was the central square of the town of beginnings, the place where our adventure would start. I turned to my friend Klein, who was standing next to me with his mouth hanging open. We both stared out at the huge crowd of people surrounding us. There were thousands of them, almost 10,000. They were all players of the game SOO. Just like us, the crowd was a riot of color and sound, with people wearing crazy hairstyles in every color of the rainbow, and carrying all sorts of awesome gear. It was pretty overwhelming but also really exciting. We were all in this together, and I couldn't wait to see what would happen next. Imagine being yanked out of your favorite video game and dropped into a weird square with every other player online. That's exactly what happened. At first everyone just stood there in stunned silence, trying to figure out where they were and what was going on. But as the seconds ticked by, people started to get restless. Mumbles and whispers grew louder and louder until it became a loud chatter. You could pick out bits of conversation here and there. "What's happening? Can we log off now? Come on, already." The crowd was getting angry and frustrated, with some players yelling for the game masters GMs to come and explain what was going on. Just as it seemed like things couldn't get any crazier, someone let out a loud scream that cut through all the noise. "Hey, look up," they shouted. My friend Klein and I automatically looked up, and what we saw was totally freaky. The bottom of the second floor, which was way above us, about 100 yards up, was covered in a weird red checkerboard pattern. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. As I took a closer look, I realized that the weird pattern in the sky was actually made up of two messages written in English. I could clearly read "warning" and "system announcement" in bright red letters. At first I was super shocked, but as I breathed a sigh of relief, my shoulders relaxed. Finally we were going to get some answers from the people in charge. The crowd in the square quieted down, leaning in to hear what would happen next. But then something totally unexpected happened. The middle of the red pattern started to sag and droop, like a giant drop of blood was forming in the sky. It slowly stretched downwards, but instead of falling to the ground, it suddenly changed shape right before our eyes. What appeared next was insane. A gigantic person at least 60 feet tall, wearing a long robe with a crimson hood. But as I looked closer, I realized that something wasn't quite right about this giant figure. We gazed up at the mysterious figure in front of us. From where we stood, we should have been able to see under its hood, but there was nothing. No face stared back at us. Instead, we saw the underside of the hood and the stitches that held it together. The long sleeves hung down, empty and dark. I knew that robe. It was the same one worn by the game moderators during the beta test for Argus. Back then they had characters that looked like old wizards with white beards or young women with glasses. But this was different. Maybe there was a glitch that kept them from creating an avatar, so they just wore the robe. Whatever the reason, seeing that empty space under the hood freaked me out. The other players around me seemed to feel the same way. We all shared a sense of unease, like something was off. And that creepy faceless figure in the robe was at the center of it all. A buzz of confusion swept through the crowd. Is that a game master? Why doesn't he have a face? Just as people were starting to get really curious, something weird happened. The giant robe's right arm moved, and a white glove poked out of the sleeve. But here's the creepy part. You couldn't see any skin connecting the robe to the glove. It was like they were just floating there. Then the other sleeve rose up too. The empty glove spread apart, towering over the crowd of 10,000 people. The faceless being seemed to open its mouth, even though you couldn't actually see one. Suddenly a calm and deep voice boomed from above the crowd. "Welcome to my world, dear players." I was taken aback. What did he mean by my world? It didn't click right away. Imagine wearing a bright red robe that shows you're all powerful. That's what this mysterious figure had on, and it meant he could control everything around him. But why did he need to show off? My friend Klein and I were totally shocked as we stared at each other. The robed figure lowered its arms and kept talking. "My name is Akihiko Kayaba," it said. "And from now on I'm the only human in charge of this world." I was so stunned that my character's breath caught in its throat. And I'm pretty sure mine did too, in real life. Akihiko Kayaba, that name sounded familiar. And then it hit me, he was a genius game designer and physicist who had made a small game studio called Argus into a huge success. How could this be the same person? It was mind-blowing. Here's the rewritten text. Kayaba Akihiko was a total legend in the gaming world. Not only was he the boss of Seo, but he also created the nerve gear technology that made it all possible. I was a huge fan, just like many other gamers. I read every interview and article about him over and over until I almost had them memorized. Just hearing his voice brought back the image of him wearing his signature white lab coat, looking super smart. But here's the thing, Kayaba never liked being in the spotlight. He always tried to avoid talking to the media, and never got involved in games like this before. So what was he doing now? I froze, trying to wrap my head around what was happening. My mind was blank, but I knew I had to start thinking fast. I tried my best to understand what was going on, but it just didn't make sense. A smooth voice came from the empty space in front of me, making fun of how confused I was. "You've probably noticed that the logout button is gone from the main menu." It said. "This isn't a mistake, it's a feature of Sword Art Online." My friend Klein spoke up, his voice shaking. "A feature?" he asked. But the voice just kept going, not letting him finish. "From now on you can't log out of the game until you conquer the castle at the top." The word castle got stuck in my head. What castle was it talking about? I didn't remember seeing any castle in the Town of Beginnings. My confusion didn't last long. The next thing he said made everything clear and super scary. "You can't just take off the nerve gear or turn it off," he warned. "If you try to force it." He paused and the room fell silent. It was like nobody was breathing. Then he dropped the bombshell. "The microwaves from the nerve gear will fry your brain and stop your heart." Klein and I looked at each other, our faces frozen in shock. It took a few seconds for his words to sink in. But when they did, it hit me like a ton of bricks. If we tried to escape, the nerve gear would scramble our brains, which means it would kill us. Here's the rewritten text. Kayaba dropped a bombshell. If you tried to turn off the nerve gear or take it off your head, it would be deadly. The crowd started to buzz with worried whispers. But nobody freaked out. I think we were all too shocked to process what he just said. My friend Klein's eyes widened as he slowly reached up to touch his nerve gear. But of course it wasn't really there in the real world. He let out a weird nervous laugh. "Is this guy serious? That's impossible. The nerve gear is just a gaming system. right? It can't actually hurt our brains, can it? He shouted to me. His voice shaking a bit. Tell me that's not true, Kurito. I stared back at him, but I just couldn't agree with what he was saying. The Nerve Gear helmet is seriously cool tech. It's got tons of tiny transmitters that send super faint waves right to your brain cells. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie. But here's the weird thing, it works kinda like a microwave you'd find in any kitchen. Yeah, you read that right, microwave. If you turned up the power on the Nerve Gear, it could actually make the water molecules in your brain cells vibrate really fast. That would create heat, and it could even be strong enough to, well, let's just say it wouldn't be good for your brain. But I thought to myself, there's no way that's possible. He's just trying to scare me, right? Imagine pulling the plug on the Nerve Gear. How could it possibly have enough power to do its thing? Unless, it's got some super powerful batteries hidden inside. My friend Klein knew exactly what I was thinking, and he let out a frustrated groan. It does, he exclaimed, looking totally desperate. I heard that a big part of the Nerve Gear is actually made up of battery cells. But come on, this is crazy. What if the power goes out? Just then Kaiba spoke up, like he had heard Klein's outburst. Let me make one thing clear, he said. The Nerve Gear has a special sequence that will kick in if certain things happen. If it loses external power for 10 minutes, or if it's disconnected from the network for 2 hours, or if someone tries to remove or destroy it, the brain-frying sequence will start. It's like a built-in safety net, or maybe not so safe, depending on how you look at it. Imagine you're trapped in a virtual game, and can't escape. That's what's happening to thousands of players right now. The people outside the game have already warned everyone about the dangers. But some families tried to force their loved ones out anyway. It didn't work. A robotic voice announced the terrible news. 2013 players have been permanently removed from both the game and the real world. The room fell silent, except for one loud scream. Most players just stood there, frozen in shock. They looked confused and scared, with weird smiles on their faces. I was in shock too. My brain didn't want to believe what was happening, but my body knew something was wrong. My legs started shaking like crazy. I stumbled backward, my knees wobbly like jelly. I didn't want to fall over. Meanwhile, Klein just collapsed onto his butt, still looking super shocked. The number kept echoing in my head. 2013 players. Could it be true? Had that many people really died, just a few minutes ago while playing the game? Some of them might have been beta testers like me. People I'd met or seen while playing. And now the creator Kayaba was saying their special gaming helmets had literally fried their brains. It sounded crazy. Klein struggled to his feet, his voice all croaky, as he muttered. No way, I don't believe it. He shook his head, like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. But the question kept nagging me. What if Kayaba was telling the truth? Come on, this is just a joke, right? He's not serious, I thought. A guy in our group spoke up, fed up with the situation. Stop messing with us, and let us out of here. We don't have all day to sit around while you try to make some big point. This is just a publicity stunt. Isn't it? Something to make the game's opening day more exciting. I was thinking the exact same thing. But the creator of the game, Kayaba, kept talking in his calm, serious voice. He didn't seem to care that we were all worried and wanted out. Don't worry about your bodies back in the real world, he said. The news about what's happening in the game is already all over TV, radio and the internet. Everyone knows what's going on.